And so regardless of the type of the tech transformation that you are undertaking, a critical first step is to understand the types of data involved and the obligations that attach to that data. And so this will colour the way in which you as a customer will go to market with your tech transformation project. So it's a case of assessing the types of information that you hold and the obligations attaching to it, be they contractual obligations, such as, for example, confidential obligations, or legal obligations, for example, under the Privacy Act. Anchali is going to talk shortly about the different types of data that might be involved. But once you've mapped out the data, then you will be in a position to structure your RFP process to ask for information that will enable you to compare respondents and their ability to meet your expectations with regard to your data. And also once you have an understanding of the information that you hold and the types of data that you hold, then that will enable you to clearly set out in your RFP documentation what your expectations are. So for example, you can set out clearly what your data security requirements might be and what your storage requirements might be, those kinds of things.
So I think as an implementation partner or a vendor, it's equally important to understand the nature of the data that will be involved in any transformation project that you will undertake or be involved in. The reason for that is that will allow you to front foot any discussions around security of the solution or security of your services with the customer and build trust right from the get-go. So if, for example, you provide an HR SaaS solution to customers, you know that that solution will very likely hold personal information and confidential information of the customer. Are there ways in which, as a supplier or a vendor, as an implementation partner or a vendor, you could provide the customer with assurances in terms of the security protocols that your solution has and verification of that security? The reason why I think this is really important is, again, it puts you ahead of the game. It gives you that trusted provider status with the customer from day one. I think that in terms of the data that's actually involved in a tech transformation project, now this can be varied. So it may involve non-confidential information, but more than likely it will also involve confidential information. And in terms of confidential information, there are several buckets that sit within that a subset of data. Now, it could be financial information that you are dealing with in the project. It could be customer information. It could be business or proprietary information such as trade secrets. And finally, it could be personal information that will be involved. Now, regardless of the category of data, it's important to understand that each of them will come with their own set of obligations, whether those obligations are contractual or they are as a result of law. Now, if you think about financial data, for example, it may be that financial data that is involved is subject to regulatory obligations in relation to that data. Another good example is as lawyers, we have confidentiality and obligations, not just ethically but also legally, in terms of the client information that we hold. And so those obligations overlay any tech transformation project that we would undertake. So once you understand the nature of the data that will be involved in the project, then as a customer, it will be easier for you to then pin down the obligations that you are likely to have in respect of that data, and also to then understand what you will need to pass down to an implementation partner or a vendor in terms of security requirements and privacy requirements that will allow you as the customer to comply with your obligations. Now, from an implementation partner or vendor's perspective, understanding the nature of the data that will be involved in a project that you're involved in will help you gauge whether those obligations that the customer is seeking to pass down to you are reasonable, whether they're appropriate given the nature of the data, and therefore you can make an assessment as to whether those are acceptable to you. Now, our comments across the webinar are going to apply to all confidential information that will be involved in a tech transformation project, but we will call out particular considerations that apply to personal information as we go through.
Yeah, so in New Zealand, the key legal obligations that attach to personal data are contained in the Privacy Act. And the current law will be replaced by a new act which comes into force on the 1st of December this year. You may have heard a lot of discussion about the new act and what it might mean for your business. We are not going to go into the detail of the new act in this seminar, but what we will do is touch on some of the obligations under the Privacy Act and the impact that they might have on a tech transformation project. So as you are probably aware, there are currently 12, soon to be 13, information privacy principles that are at the core of the Privacy Act. These information privacy principles set out how organisations are to collect and use, disclose, store, transfer, and place limits on retention of personal information. A new privacy principle coming in under the new Act places limits on the disclosure of personal data outside of New Zealand. Another one of the big changes that you've probably heard about is mandatory reporting of serious data breaches to the Privacy Commissioner and to affected individuals. It is all of these principles and obligations that should be considered when embarking on a technology transformation project and how that might affect the contracts that you put in place with service providers.
I think it's also important to bear in mind any obligations that might apply to data that you hold that come from other jurisdictions. So for example, if you hold personal information that will be involved in the technology transformation project that is about data subjects located in the EU, then you'll need to consider whether the GDPR or the General Data Protection Regulation is going to apply to that data and how you will ensure compliance throughout your tech transformation project. Now, you will all, I'm sure, be aware of your obligations under GDPR if you are a business that either provides goods or services to data subjects located in the EU or monitors the behaviour of data subjects in the EU, then you will be subject to the extraterritorial application of the GDPR and will need to take into account your obligations when you are looking at a tech transformation project that involves that subset of data.